Last night, you spent 2 hours deciding what to wear to the party. This morning, it'll take you 2 minutes to list it on Depop and make your money back. Just grab your phone, snap a few photos, and we'll take care of the rest. The sheer dress and platform heels you'll never wear again? There's a birthday girl searching for them right now. Your one and done look is about to pay for your next night out. Or at least the ride home. Your style can make you cash. Start selling on Depop, where taste recognizes taste.
And welcome to How Are the Podcast. It's Gav, and we're back in game week. Sunderland are back in the Premier League this week, and we take on Spurs. But we're not quite ready to preview the game yet, although this is probably the first time you've heard my voice all week because we did pre-record a ton of things. So if you're bored and you haven't got caught up on what we've got on the feeds this week, there is plenty, lots of stuff to keep you entertained. In amongst all of that were things like our Room 101 episodes where the lads got to whinge a bit about things that annoy them about football. And I guess that's a bit of a bounce off to today's episode because we've got a very special guest with us. But before we get to the special guests, I'll introduce you to just the normal guests, which is Johnny Hawley. Hello, mate.
Hi, Gav. Yeah, I don't feel particularly special either, if it makes you feel any better. So I'll take the standard guest label.
Yeah, no special intro for you, mate. You're just part of the furniture now. You don't need one, do you? Also with us today, our guest, as I kind of alluded to there, is Michael Brunskill, who is from the FSA. And for people who don't know what the FSA are, they are the Football Supporters Association, and used to have an office in Sunderland, as we were just talking about before we hit record there. But Michael's also a massive Sunderland fan. Hello, mate.
Hi, Gav. Thank you for having me on. Don't think I've ever been referred to as a special guest before on things.
Well, I think anybody who just isn't on 50 episodes a week is technically a special guest to our listeners and to us anyways. But yeah, you're a big Sunderland fan, aren't you? So that it must be interesting going along to the stadium these days and seeing all the changes around the place that have made it a bit more of a fan-friendly place to go and watch games, and obviously the team rising at the same time as all these things are going on. I mean, I look at it just as purely through my eyes as a fan and go, oh, bloody hell, it's amazing all this. But considering your line of work, it must be even more interesting, I guess.
Yeah, they've done a phenomenal job, haven't they? I mean, anyone who goes to games picks up on just the vibe in recent years. They've just nailed it, haven't they? Even down to pre-match music, the feeling around that, the tifo, just everything's come together amazingly from our perspective, on pitch and off pitch. It's just, I don't know, since obviously the playoffs last year, I just haven't known it 9 months or whatever it is now as a Sunderland supporter. It's just phenomenal. And I started going, my backstory is a few people listening to this will probably pick up. I've got a Gateshead accent. I'm from Gateshead. But my dad's a Sunderland supporter. And so I've been going with him since the Dennis Smith era. And now I take my kids. So I stopped taking my kids in just after COVID League One's time. So their first game was actually the 5-0 against Sheffield.
In the trenches then.
Yeah. But their first game we won 5-0 and went top of the league. So my daughter was only 6 then or something. So she's like, oh, is it like this all the time? And I'm like, yeah. And
then Lee Johnson was sacked about 3 weeks later. back down to reality.
My main memory about it is that she's like, does that mean we're above Newcastle? We're top of the league? I was like, yeah. She didn't really understand the league system then, but she does now. And now we are. So happy days.
Do you know what I'm saying there about walking into the stadium and seeing all the changes and stuff? Obviously, in your line of work, you must see quite a lot from other clubs as well. Is it just me, or are clubs becoming more bothered about things like this? Or is it just a Sunderland thing? Because when I was a kid, even not even that long ago, really, it just felt like you were always up against ownership and complaining about things not getting done around the place. And I don't know, I even now when I watch Match of the Day or watch games on the TV, it feels like the whole experience for fans has really improved across the board.
I think that has been a big change the past 10, 15 years I've been involved in this. When I started working for the Football Supporters Association, it was quite hard to even engage a lot of journalists on the issues around the supporters had, say, in relation to ticket prices or whatever. You'd have these big name journalists who were really only interested in sort of transfer gossip and who's picking who game to game. But now a lot of the biggest name journalists are tuning into it to get the supporter issues, and I think that feeds through the clubs. And then added on top of that, you've got great podcasts, like How We Are the Podcast, and that's replicated across the country at clubs who have their own great podcasts who can exert sort of supporter opinion and pressure in ways. And then that's led on, and now you have what I call basically structurally sort of embedded in the systems that they have to sit down with supporters and listen to their concerns throughout the season, which is a good thing. You can't always enforce change to that. We haven't got a big stick we can always wield, but if you sit down and talk to people, you can over time make a difference. And we've seen that. I mean, as you alluded to in the Stadium Light, we've got the safe standing area now. That came apart as a long-running FSA campaign to introduce standing areas. At first, the football authorities thought, "Oh, it'll never happen. You're wasting your time. You're just banging your head against the wall." But we got there in the end, and we're convinced the Sports Ground Safety Authority and the Premier League and the AFL and eventually the government that this was a thing that supporters wanted and would be valuable and help atmospheres. And I think it has done. And that's replicated across all manner of things.
Yeah, it's class now, Johnny, isn't it? You walk the ground. It's almost like every time you pop into the stadium now, there's something different for us as fans. And I mean,
even just this week, the Welcome to Sunderland thing, my dad was like sort of buzzing about that. He was like, "Is it the same one they've had at the back of the full well?" I was like, "I'm not sure. They've had it in storage. Like, I don't know. It might be a new one. I'm not sure." But he was buzzing about all that. So it's great. And at Sunderland, it's chimed in as well, hasn't it? With like such a rise through the leagues and stuff, especially like I say, the last 9 to 12 months, it's been phenomenal. So I don't know what it would take to top this. We're going to have to go on and win trophies on. Like, I can't imagine can't imagine to think we went from like watching Callum McFadden during COVID, and then within like about 3 years we've got Ronaldo at left back, who's like the best left back I've probably seen at the club. It's just been a phenomenal rise.
I know Andy Melville's became like the Howie the Podcast bingo card.
Yeah, you like mentioning him, don't you?
I think Callum McFadden's going to have to go on there soon as well. He gets a mention every time. Yeah, Johnny, for us as fans, it's great, isn't it? When you walk in there and you just see all the change. Like I'm in the southwest corner, so I'm going to have safe stand next season. Where are you? What are you saying?
He's stand with all the
all the
grannies and with all the lads with the blankets over the knees and that like decibel limits.
Can you imagine if they put safe stand in East Stand? It'd be absolute hell on.
Well, it'd be the safest standing area in the country because neither would use it. Like,
aye, but yeah, it's great, isn't it? Just all these things we're talking about. It's fantastic.
No, it's absolutely brilliant. I think Michael spoke really well about it there. It's been great at Sunderland in particular because it's been accompanied with the football improving as well. So obviously, when you get one going with the other, nobody's going to be complaining, are they? When your team's playing good football and you're enjoying the match day experience, but I think it is like a bit of a shining example to some other clubs because I think the sort of the fundamentals at the base of it from the club have just been quite simple, engage with the supporters, find out what they actually want and what they want to see around the club, in the ground, all of that kind of thing. It sounds dead easy, like just see what they want and deliver it. But I think a lot of the times, certainly the higher and higher up the echelons of football that you go and the ownerships of some of the super rich elite clubs where the amount of money they're spending on stuff is astronomical, they're maybe a little bit less inclined to just go with what the fans want because there are other commercial interests or what have you. But, the stuff like the Welcome to Sunderland badge that's coming, Legends Way, even just the lick of paint and the bit of a refresh that the ground got over the summer. I think all of that was... You could have easily just got a group of fans into a room and gone, what would you like to see around the ground? And a lot of people would have been saying these things. And I think we've seen it bleed through into other areas of the club. We've talked about it a bit recently, but, the Hummel kit deals is another one. It's just an area where it's a bit of an easy win for the club to go, everybody loves this. There's a big connection with Sunderland and it'll really get us in touch with the heritage quite quickly without too much of an overhead for us. Yeah, let's go ahead and do it. And just by putting fans actually as at the centre of, or even within that kind of target of what do we want to do for the club, well, if you aim it at the fans are going to be happy. And if you've got a happy fan base, then, how many more things at your football club are going to be much, much easier to deal with than they would otherwise be, which, again, as Sunderland fans, I'm sure we can all attest to at times over the years. The fan base mood maybe hasn't helped with everything, has it?
Well, that's it. Yeah. How do you find Sunderland are, Michael? So you like say you're getting oversight of various clubs. Like how are we to deal with from the perspective of where you're coming from a work perspective? Like, are Sunderland quite a open club when it comes to discussing fan matters and taking ideas on board compared to, I don't know, say other teams in the Premier League?
Yeah, I think so. I think as well it comes down to people, doesn't it? And I think Sunderland have got some really good individuals working there who we've dealt with over the years. Like shout out to Chris Ward as a support and liaison officer who's always been really proactive in trying to improve things for support, as he's a great guy. I mean, even rewinding back to, this is going back a bit now, but about 12 years ago, Northumbria Police were getting very iffy around the derby, and it was maybe looking like they might try and go to some type of a bubble match approach or even an away fan ban approach or something. And that was really worrying. And support us together. There was actually a meeting of Sunderland and Newcastle supporters groups together to talk about that and make sure that didn't happen under the banner of Derby to be proud of. But again, that couldn't have happened without Sunderland as a club and the people who work there making that happen. So yeah, I think very good. And I mean, we've got now, if anyone's listening, there's a supporters group there, Red and White Army. I would encourage people to join that supporters group and get involved if you think things could be done differently or better, get stuck in. But also as well, it does seem like across the Premier League, obviously the majority of Premier League clubs are now US owned and we've got nation states and stuff. And we've got our own billionaire owner. But I have to say, as billionaire owners go, he does seem to be more connected to the club than others that I see. And he seems, presumably that drips through in terms of being aware of what's going on in and around the club, as we're seeing there on match days. So he tunes into that. But yeah, it's just really good vibes at the minute, isn't it? And a lot of that is always topped off by the football, isn't it? If the football's going well on the pitch, there's always a positive vibe amongst that. And even while the football's going well, we've got like immeasurable things but they're just a really likeable team at the minute, aren't they? I can't remember as often having such likeable teams as we've had. The team that went up last year and this team, the individuals involved, is just fantastic. So it's just positive all around for us. But I would say, yeah, I think Sunderland are one of the better teams on that for sure. There's some clubs where their owners just, I'm not going to name names, but they just don't want to know, they don't care. I mean, I will name names in some places. You've got like Man United charging kids 62 quid to go and see a game in Ratcliffe, sacking a few hundred staff to save next to no money for them in the grand scheme of things, And I'm not sure how far the groups there have got with making an impact there, So, yeah,
That's
great times.
I guess that's an interesting segue into something I want to talk about, actually, because ticket prices at Sunderland traditionally have been pretty fair, I would say. Like, I've never really felt robbed, and that was even when I was watching Callum McFadden in League One. I still felt like I was paying a fairly fair price, even by League One standards for a season ticket. And Sunderland's season cards haven't really crept up that much in price. But this year, the club introduced a model which I'm sure you're aware of because you'll have been affected by it.
Yeah.
But this, it was like a loyalty system where, if basically, I don't know how, it was never properly explained to us, I don't think, how it worked out. But in effect, if you were a long tenured season card holder, you were given more favourable pricing. Is that common in across the spectrum or what? Like, 'cause I've got to admit, that surprised me a little bit that we took that approach.
I've not picked up on that before. I've not seen another club doing, like, it's a banding effectively, isn't it? So if you had a season ticket longer than like 3 seasons, you got the biggest discount. And then between like last season to 3, you got a different discount. And if you're sort of new season ticket holder and went in the Premier League, you paid more again. I've not seen a club take that approach. All clubs, the Premier League is quite restrictive on away pricing where it has a £30 cap, which, plug for the FSA, that was a Football Supporters Association initiative, which secured the £30 away cap, which is still in place 10 years later. But the Premier League tends to take a much more hands-off approach on home ticket pricing. It doesn't have the same rules around it, which means the clubs are freer to do what they want a little bit. So we've seen very recently Liverpool have announced that they're tying their home ticket prices to inflation for the next 3 years. So it's guaranteed to go up, isn't it, for the next few years if you're a Liverpool fan. So all clubs do these sort of individual things. Like you say with Sunderland, it did creep up. It has crept up, I think. But in the grand scheme thing, by Premier League pricing, it does still feel reasonable. Particularly, I take 2 kids, so I pay for their tickets. And my wife's ticket as well, but the kids' tickets in particular are really good value, phenomenal value. So that is really good. But I hadn't seen a club do it in that way, but all clubs take different approaches. There's 20 different Premier League clubs and they each think their way is the best way, generally speaking. What we would like to see the Premier League do more, because we've got a campaign called Stop Exploiting Loyalty, which is focused on home ticket prices. Because obviously Sunderland's might be reasonable at the minute, but if they kept putting them up year on year, they would soon become unreasonable. So we would like to see the Premier League take a little bit of a stronger grip on that. I actually think it's in the Premier League's interests to do so. We're not asking out the goodness of our hearts necessarily. But if you look at the Premier League, as it shares its money, it is quite an equitable league compared to, say, Spain, where Barca and Real hoover up the vast majority of broadcast revenue, or Germany, where Bayern Munich dominate, Paris Saint-Germain in France. You tend to get a more competitive league in the Premier League, albeit there's obviously a chunk of clubs at the top who are somewhat dominating. But that's a big selling point of the Premier League, that we share our wealth a bit more evenly. Now, if you don't have any controls on home prices, there is no chance that Sunderland can be competitive with, say, Liverpool when it comes to generating revenue in the home end, because, of course, Liverpool have that global appeal. They're always going to be try to charge one-off visitors more, tap into that global prestige that they have. So even if all the clubs keep bumping up their prices to increase ticket revenue, Liverpool and Arsenal, Man United are always going to accelerate away from the rest. And I don't think that's particularly healthy for the league either. So I think there's scope for the league to act on that in their own interests of keeping a competitive league, because also at the moment, ticket revenue isn't actually that big a proportion of a club's income. I mean, sometimes I listen to these talking debates on TalkSport or whatever, and you'd think that the clubs wouldn't be able to buy a player if they didn't put up ticket prices. But the reality is, at most, they generate, by squeezing fans a lot tighter, than maybe generate. I mean, in Spurs' case, they can generate more than almost everyone at the time because of the size of the stadium. They generated £3 million more by bumping up prices, and also paid Daniel Levy, this then Spurs chairman, a £3 million bonus that year, which was handy. So the money that they raise is minimal compared to the TV revenue. Most clubs' revenue is between 8 to 15% is driven by match day revenue. The rest is broadcast income. So really squeezing clubs' home supporters on ticket prices has a real negative impact on loyal match-going fans who make up who are part of the quote product. Do you know what I mean? That also during COVID, when empty stadiums, what a difference that made. It wasn't I zoned out slightly from football, and I wasn't really as interested. And so we're part of the product. They need loud, vibrant stadiums, and if they want that, maybe they've got to charge people fair prices. Otherwise, you're going to end up with stadiums full of tourists, effectively.
Yeah. That exploiting loyalty campaign that Michael was talking about there, Johnny, it's interesting to me because I've often asked myself this question, is there a point where I would be priced out of going to games? And I genuinely, I wouldn't want to miss the experience of going to games, because I've often compared supporting Sunderland to being addicted to a really dangerous drug, because it is. And could I not go to games? I genuinely don't think I could. I'm going on holiday next week. I'm going to miss 2 games, one of which I'll probably be in the air for the first half, and that is killing me that I'm going to miss a half of football. So I've often thought about this thing, is there a point in which we would literally stand there and go, nah, I can't do that. You're overcharging us. And have you ever put yourself in that situation in your head where you're what would it take for me to stop going to the matches?
I'm like you, I think, in that we're both tapped in the head enough that there's no chance that we'd stop going. The Bournemouth game this season, I travelled for 22 hours straight on 2 hours sleep to make kick-off from the Dominican Republic. You know what I mean? Flew overnight, got a National Express coach up, and you know what I mean? Just to go to Bournemouth at home, which I could
at least we won.
I mean, it was a brilliant game in the end, so it was well worth it. But I think if you're asking the kind of guy who's going to make that journey just to go to a home game, whether he's going to get priced out, unless I physically couldn't afford it, I'd sacrifice anything else in my personal life before I'd sacrifice Sunderland. And I think to bring it back to a serious point, a lot of people are the same. And certainly the majority of the sort of hardcore support of any given club would feel the same as us, where it's, everything else would have to give first, and this would be the last one to go. And it is important, I think, to highlight that. It's easy for clubs to exploit that because it's such a profound, part of people's identity and sort of emotional center of their lives, that it is incredibly, incredibly difficult for people to be objective about the way that they behave with that, because it's irrational, isn't it? Like, football is not logical. It's not a sensible game. It's not something that we love because it's predictable. And yeah, for clubs to be able to exploit that, I think it's a continuous and ever-present danger, and it's worth speaking up about. And I also think, Michael, when he was talking about it there, I think it is worth sort of banging the drum that this isn't necessarily a selfless campaign either. There is sort of mutual interest on both sides for this, because obviously fans don't want to be exploited and don't want to be paying ridiculous amounts of money. But the point about fans in stadiums and atmospheres and stuff, it sounds a little bit trite, I think, to a lot of people. If you say that, sometimes it's like, well, the atmospheres, who cares about that? But and I think this is something that people have started to talk about more, particularly this season, is if you bring in tourists and day trippers and people paying hundreds and hundreds of pounds for a ticket all the time, you are eroding that core support in the ground. The atmosphere gets worse, and the COVID example is perfect. Football on TV during COVID was absolutely horrible. The most interesting thing that happened that everyone remembers is the goal line technology failing in that Aston Villa game. You know what I mean? It's nothing about the last minute goals or the limbs or whatever, which, yeah, okay, it's a little bit silly sometimes and it's a bit of fun, but there's a reason that Sky TV and TNT and Amazon and all these broadcast companies across the world are willing to pay such massive amounts of money for Premier League football. And a large part of that is the fans and the atmospheres in the stadiums. And not only would that, obviously, it would make the match-going experience worse for us as fans if that's diminished and if that starts to die off. But eventually, it could take a year, 5 years, 10 years. It'll hurt the pockets and the bottom lines of the owners and the money men in football. And yeah, so if they can't see that it's going to come and bite them, then maybe we do need to tell them. It doesn't just have to be a sort of altruistic, for the love of the game kind of message, even though I think that's true. I think, it's fair enough to point out that actually there is a mutual self-interest here, and there's a reason why fans should be part of all these processes and decision-making kind of processes going forward. It's a symbiotic relationship. It's not us against them, or it shouldn't be anyway.
No. I even saw on Twitter, Michael, yesterday, Millwall fans complaining about footy tourists turning up to the games, saying, like, because they've had a good season this season, there's an extra 10, 12,000 fans come from nowhere. And he was saying, I would rather they didn't bother. It was better when they weren't coming. And so it's bleeding right down the league. Even, you think the case of Wrexham, where Wrexham sort of have, 3 back-to-back promotions from the National League now up the Championship, and then they could be involved in the playoffs this season, and you never know what could happen then. But along the ride with Wrexham have came an entirely different fan base, which have came from watching them on TV, and because they associate the club with the ownership and maybe didn't have that pre-existing relationship with Wrexham. It seems to be something which is in the back of the minds of quite a lot of what I would call like fans like us who've lived and breathed Sunderland, and I had no choice. Johnny had no choice. You had no choice because your dad made sure you were a Sunderland fan. It does seem to be something that's just ringing around the back of people's heads that our clubs are not what they were when we grew up necessarily, and that there is an increasing willingness from ownership to just welcome in what we would call tourist fans. Like, is that a difficult path to navigate? Because on one hand, you've got a lot of money comes into the football club through tourism and through international supporters. I mean, this game at the weekend for Sunderland is our designated international fan game, and there's going to be hundreds and maybe even thousands of Sunderland fans flying in from all over the world just to be at the Spurs game. So, we embrace it, but it does seem to be something that's sort of taken over the conscience of your ordinary fan who might support Tottenham, as you mentioned before, or Arsenal, and the camera pans around and there's just, there's people from all over the world there with cameras out. And it's a tough line to to kind of navigate that, isn't it? Where you know what's best for your football club. Do you just want every fan in the ground to be Joe Bloggs from Pennywell, who's never left Sunderland, or do you need these people effectively to help grow your football club?
Yeah, I think you're pretty right there. It's a fine line to navigate because football should be open for everyone, and it is open for everyone, and there's nothing wrong with someone wanting to come along to see a Premier League game. I mean, back in the day, I was in New York and I went to see the Yankees game when I was younger. I didn't have a clue what was going on, but I've been a tourist in another sport event, a good crack. It was interesting to see. There's nothing wrong with that, but you've got to strike the balance, haven't you? And I think what you do see some of the biggest clubs is definitely a tendency for them to want to move away from, say, season ticket holders or locals having access to tickets to actually moving towards selling to one-off fans who visit the country maybe once a year to see the team, because they will spend more. They'll spend more in the club shop. They would be willing to pay more for a match day ticket. And it's navigating that balance is interesting. There's also an interesting dynamic developed for some London clubs. I know you were talking about Millwall there. But obviously, say a tourist comes from wherever and they love the Premier League, and that's fair enough, and they might want to see a Chelsea game or an Arsenal game. Well, they're going to really struggle to get tickets, I think, in a lot of cases. So quite often, they might look at going to somewhere like Fulham or Millwall, and you've identified that. There's nothing wrong with that, but it obviously changes things slightly. There's interesting ones at West Ham. There's been cases, I know, at the London Stadium, Olympic Stadium, of supporters who've come along supporting like the visiting team but managed to get tickets in the home end, and they haven't done it to deliberately antagonise. It's not like an old school, we're going to take the home end, you know what I mean? It's just that they don't understand that the culture in this country is home and away ends, and it's not like, say, in the US where you have supporters mixing and stuff. So you've got some guy maybe sat there and he's takes his coat off and he's got a Man U top on, and he's shouting and bawling, celebrating when Man U's scoring. All the West Ham fans are turning to him and saying, "Who are you?" So it creates interesting dynamics that we occasionally have to deal with as well. But Fulham used to have that neutral end, I suppose, as well, didn't they? We had a mini version of that when you used to be able to go down to Fulham and get tickets in the neutral end and stuff. So it's always been there one way or another, I suppose. But I think it is interesting. But again, sometimes it's to be celebrated if a club does it right. I remember when we had Roy Keane and Drummondville and all that, and we had loads of Irish supporters coming along every week, and it was class, it was really good. So the time's right, it's not a bad thing at all, but what clubs shouldn't do is use economics to dictate who gets in the ground in that way, by pushing up prices and pricing out the local people from there.
That's it, yeah. If they push the prices up, there's only a certain type of person who would be prepared to pay £100 plus for a ticket for a game, and that would probably be someone who's flew halfway around the world to get there and doesn't really care. They just want to go to a game.
Exactly. I mean, Man U did away with concessions, expecting kids to pay £62. So then, obviously, you've got to go with a kid. All of a sudden, you're paying hundreds and hundreds of pounds if you've got a couple of kids to see a fairly standard sort of run of the league match. And I think football is different to other industries as well. It is different. Like, clubs trade on the name of their town or city to tap into the community in that way that there's just no other business does, and they reap in the benefits of that, but they also, I think, then have a responsibility and a duty to those people in that community to ensure that the tickets are available and affordable and accessible.
Yeah, well, after the break, I think we'll talk about Johnny's favourite thing, VAR, which obviously is on everyone's lips at the minute, and he looks delighted by that. But yes, we'll be back after the break. We'll see you in a minute.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
Good things come in fours, like ukulele strings, boy band members, and PayPal Pay in 4. No fees, no interest, no impact on your credit score. Just the flexibility to pay the way that works for you. Strum it, hum it, pay it in 4. Tap the banner to learn more. Subject to approval. Learn more at paypal.com/payin4. PayPal Inc. NMLS 910457.
Picture this. A curve in the road. A change in plans. Well, what do you say? With the all-new Audi Q3, the answer's always yes. Yes to adventure. Yes to escape. Yes to performance. Yes to comfort. Yes to right now. Because saying yes without hesitation, that's real luxury. The all-new Audi Q3, made for the yes life.
And welcome back to How the Podcast. And I did mention this in the intro, but in recent weeks on the pod, we even had an episode devoted to VAR and debating the ills and not very few positives that we've that there are with VAR, but it was a big debate. If you want to go back and listen to it, you can. That's on the feeds. I think it was out last week. But it's like I said, it's a hot topic because in the last couple of weeks, Michael's organisation, the FSA, they published a fan survey around VAR in the Premier League, which revealed that 3/4 of fans of Premier League clubs are against the use of VAR, according to the survey. And that was a survey of just under 8,000 supporters who'd responded. I was one of them. I did get involved in that. We actually championed that survey on the pod a few times because as we like to whinge about these things, we also like to point out when we can actually do something about it. And I think Martin was pretty passionate on getting that one across, so people probably will have heard us talking about it and maybe responded themselves. But just to quickly run through some of the takes from that, as I said, 3/4 of the fans surveyed had said that they were against it. Of those asked, 90% disagreed that the introduction of the technology in the Premier League had improved the matchday experience, and 91% believe that VAR has harmed the spontaneity of goal celebrations. And a total of 94% disagreed that VAR makes watching football on TV more enjoyable. The statement, which came from Thomas Concannon, who is the FSA's Premier League network manager, was that the results show that most fans want VAR removed. We've all lived with VAR for so long now that we've seen the negative impact it's had on the game. People are annoyed about the time it takes, annoyed about the accuracy, and annoyed about the reduced spontaneity. It does take away from what football is meant to be and what those special moments are about. And the Premier League response to this was interesting because
I was just going to say, make sure you get that bit on balance. You know, Premier League research shows.
People might be familiar with I think it's a GIF, and it's a man sitting with a cup of tea, or maybe a little animal or something, sitting with a cup of tea in a burning building, and it just says, "This is fine." That's basically the Premier League statement, which reads, "We recognise the importance of minimising the impact of VAR on the supporter experience. As part of ongoing dialogue with supporters, Premier League research indicates fans are largely in favour of keeping VAR, but improving the way it is used." So 90-odd% of the people surveyed by the FSA said that they wanted rid of it. Premier League are saying, actually, everyone wants it. So yeah, it's an interesting one, this, Michael. I think what we can probably take from this is that it's going nowhere, and the Premier League have no interest in getting rid of it. I think the game as a whole has no interest in getting rid of VAR. But the distinction's important here because it was about Premier League clubs. And I've said this a few times on the pod over the last couple of years. When I watch a big tournament, like, AFCON or the Women's Euros, to be honest, the best use of VAR that I've seen was in the Women's Euros when England won it the first time. I thought it was brilliant. Quick, decisive action. Everything seemed to just flow brilliantly. Even in the Qatar World Cup, I felt VAR worked well. What is it about the Premier League where it just seems to be vastly different? Like, why is it that every fan you seem to speak to about VAR just rolls their eyes the way Johnny did when I brought it up before the break? People really just can't get on board with it. Yet it does seem to be used elsewhere pretty well. Like, I don't know how much you can actually say on this, but what's your take on it all?
No, I think that's interesting points. And like you say, 3 out of 4 people told us that they didn't want VAR now, all things considered. Probably worth pointing out as well, because I think it is relevant to us and it's a good thing for the FSA that sort of 9 out of 10 people who filled in the survey are matchgoers who've been to at least one game a season. The majority of respondents have been to 15 plus games a season. So this is still the prism of people who actually go to games, which I think is important as well. You know, it's not just someone watching like with a cup of tea on a Sunday afternoon who might have a different view on it. We are realistic. 3 out of 4 people might not want VAR, but like you say, it's not going anywhere anytime soon. At a global level, FIFA have embraced it. Obviously, the Premier League use it. So it's not going anywhere, but it's about speeding things up, isn't it? Improving the process, making sure that people in the stadium know what's going on a little bit more, maybe, because I think those factors can be improved. Personally speaking, about 10 years ago, when VAR was sort of starting to be talked about, introduced, and goal line technology came in, our line then was that people will be happy in the long run with goal line technology because it's instantaneous and doesn't spoil the flow of the game. Anything which slows things down will ultimately result in unhappiness amongst supporters. And we said that 10 years ago, and I think that's sort of how it's played out, hasn't it? I think there's just a feeling that it's just intervening too often. And that was definitely the survey respondents. There was a high percentage said basically they didn't want to see it expanding into getting involved in corners and things like that. You know, it's already in the game enough. Thank you very much. So I think our line will be on like trying to refine it, speed things up. It's important to point out as well, this isn't an anti-ref survey. You know, we actually work with we speak to PGMO quite regularly. We speak to the Premier League regularly about this stuff to try and improve things. So it's not like an anti-PL or anti-PGMO thing, but it's quite clear if you're the Premier League and you've got 8,000 people here who've responded, and 3 out of 4 are saying, you know, this is, like you said, I like the image of the gift that you brought up there. That's basically it. Maybe they can listen to that. I know the Premier League, we did ask on their survey how many people responded, how many were matchgoers and stuff, but they don't give that information up for, I don't know, commercial confidentiality or whatever. I know they've structured the question slightly differently, which is maybe how they got a different answer, because we just wanted clarity, right? So we said, basically, all things considered, we've had this system in place for a number of years. Do you want VAR, yes or no? And that gave us quite a strong data point. What the Premier League did was, and I understand it, I get it, they said, do you want VAR? Yes, I like it how it is and I'll have it. Yes, I would like it, but an improved version, or no, I don't want it. So that led to a slightly different data set for them, because obviously a certain percentage of people will say, yeah, I want it to be perfect. Now, the question is, like, what does that mean? And can you actually ever get there? I'm not sure. Football's laws are sometimes quite written in grey ink, I think, on some occasions. And whereas a goal line tech is like, is it over the line or not? VAR is obviously rule on things that are very subjective occasionally. But also want to see things with one eye as well, because, I mean, earlier in the season, I was convinced we were getting a bad rub of the green on VAR, you know, Enzo Lafayette. There was that Everton penalty wasn't given.
Yeah.
Where their player handled it, Michael Keane, wasn't it, with his hand dangling, and I was like, oh, come on, even the VAR decisions are going against it. And then we've had maybe had 1 or 2 more go forward since then. Particularly Luke O'Neill having a little wrestle in the box at Elgin Road. But swings and roundabouts, isn't it? So
can I just say, playing 5-a-side in Leeds, I get reminded of that frigging 09 penalty incident every week now. Cheers, Luke.
Well, it is interesting though, isn't it? Because the problem that we've got, and I kind of mentioned that before, it's going nowhere, right? It's going absolutely nowhere. So it is about how can we be proactive, and how can we help improve VAR and make sure that we aren't having this conversation in 10 years. It's just part of the game. It works. And people
it seems cleaner, the systems that they use at international level seem
totally agree.
Come to a decision quicker and more clean, and seem less likely to intervene in the minutiae of things. And I think that's probably the key, because it does start to take away from the spontaneity of stuff. It's interesting as well, though. I think it's been an interesting sort of insight into, and I include myself in this, an insight into supporter psyches as well, because for some reason, I don't know what the answer is, we're more than happy to accept a ball being like a centimetre over the line, and people are just like, oh yeah, that's a goal. But if a player's like a centimetre offside, everyone goes into meltdown, you know, and it's still a centimetre. But I don't know why one's different than the other, but it clearly is.
I hope Martin's listening to this, by the way, because his rant on the Room 101 pod last week about balls being over the line and stuff. Yeah, Chris wasn't particularly generous to that one and didn't stick it in, did he?
It's a good job Martin lives in Australia, so we're safe from him right now while we're having this conversation.
Yeah, but I mean, it is going to be a sticking point, and this is the thing, Johnny. Right, we as fans, we can, Michael just listed off a few things there. For Sunderland fans, actually, it's pretty new to us because we've been out of the Premier League for that long. That until the playoff final, we hadn't actually experienced it ourselves in a Sunderland game. And obviously, you could make the case that if it wasn't for VAR, we might not be in the Premier League.
Well, I was going to say, you could make the case that out of every football club that's ever existed, we've benefited more from VAR
than anybody else.
Yeah, but then you have moments like that Lafay non-penalty penalty in the Bournemouth game, which everybody with a set of eyes could see it was a penalty. VAR still didn't give it. We're always going to have it. To me, almost it feels like we're always going to have these talking points, and that's maybe why it's favourable to the Premier League. They want people talking about contentious decisions. It drives engagement. It drives up views and clicks online. If there's a contentious decision in a game where VAR's not intervened or it has intervened, and it's it gets people up in arms. It's Michael kind of touched on it there. It's almost good for TV, isn't it? And
it's definitely good for the wider sort of media environment around football, because especially when it's like Man U or Liverpool or Arsenal, Man City, maybe Chelsea, it's just like relentlessly discussed, and there's no doubt that drives huge volumes of clicks and engagement for sometimes independent media as well, not only just the clubs in the Premier League, but that's what drives that. I mean, I think ultimately the Premier League and the PGMO PGMO do just want it because they want as high a percentage of decisions correct as possible. And VAR is delivering that, albeit, interestingly in our survey, trust in referee seems lower than it was. And I think that's because when something goes wrong on VAR, it's really obvious that something's went wrong. It's a bit man bites dog. Do you know what I mean? Whereas 10, 15 years ago, it was just if a ref got something wrong, well, it happened in the game and you shrug and move on. But now it's like constant analysis of it. So I think that counterintuitively, what was brought in to build trust and help support referees is slightly somewhat undermined trust in referees at times, which is a bit ironic. But I think PGMO do just want to really, I've spoken to them directly lots of times, and they do just want a really high percentage of decisions, as high a percentage as possible, to be correct. And the in-stadium experience isn't necessarily their number one priority on that. And sometimes the two things work against each other, don't they?
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting point, though, about the kind of conflicting aims of the different parties in this, because, as you say, obviously PGMO and the referees, okay, people with the conspiracies about, the refs are bent against us or whatever, okay, fine, but referees just want to make the right decisions. I think, by and large, refs want to go home after a game and not be talked about. VAR doesn't help with that. But like you say, in the search of accurate decisions, you might be willing to put up with a bit of that. I think where the frustration comes in from supporters, like you've said, and I think, like Gav, you were kind of going to touch on, is there's just such a clearly massive contradiction between the way they've implemented it and the way that fans want to see it. And there aren't honest enough conversations about the reasons behind that. And it's the same in a lot of industries, but the Premier League aren't going to come out and say, sorry, match-going fans, we actually just care less about you than we do about the refereeing quality, or whatever. PGMO aren't going to come out and say, sorry, lads, we don't really care about explaining things to you in detail. We just want to make the decisions, which, at heart, that's probably what's going on, at least to some degree. And in the same way that fans aren't going to come out and go, refs, we actually, well, probably will, but refs, we just don't like any of you. We want the decisions to happen without you involved if we could have it. Whereas supporters, I think, again, like this conversation about the ticket prices and stuff we were talking about before, there is some mutual self-interest here. And there are things that match-going supporters want to see improved that I think would, with knock-on effects, be helping everybody. Like, if you're reducing the time taken for these interventions and the decisions to be reached, the TV experience is better. Like, yes, there's a bit of drama and you can spin narratives out of VAR decisions over a season, and you get these, the justice table or whatever, and it's Team X has had 5 VAR calls go against them through the season, then someone's had 4 and all the rest of it. Like, so you'd still get that, but if you're making it less and less intrusive and more palatable to the supporters, in the ground, the atmospheres are, again, like the atmospheres get knocked. You're waiting 5 minutes for a VAR check. People aren't launching straight into chants and singing and getting excited after that. Like, it's all intertwined. Like, the match day experience, the quality of the refereeing decisions, the speed of the interventions, the clarity over what should be reviewed and what shouldn't be reviewed, which I think is another thing that's a massive sticking point for a lot of people. Like, where's the clear and obvious threshold? Does it even exist? Like, all of these questions aren't answered clearly because I don't think everyone behind the scenes is genuinely in alignment on what they're trying to achieve with some of these things. So there actually aren't really answers to some of those questions if you drill down, because the Premier League want one thing, the referees want another thing, the supporters want another thing, the clubs want another thing. You know, we hear about the supporters being furious about VAR, but there was a vote a couple of seasons ago, wasn't there, in the Premier League, and was Wolves, I think, were the only club to vote for abolishing VAR. The other 19 at the time all voted for it. So there's all of these interests coming from all of these different angles, and unfortunately, the match-going fan tends to be the sort of the group out of this equation who has the least amount of power and the smallest voice to actually make themselves heard. Whereas, like with that FSA survey, I also just want to quickly say, whoever designed that form that you filled the information in, beautiful design. Love that.
Shout out to my colleague Gareth Cummins, who's our survey guru.
Yes, well done, Gareth, because that was an enjoyable survey to fill in.
That's got to be the most nerdy square thing you've ever said, that, by the way.
They were calling us Johnny Stats on the pods last week, so it can't be worse than that. But yeah, no, I think like there are so many positive, fruitful conversations that could come out of this, but it's about getting the right people in the rooms together and talking, and obviously that's the most difficult thing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like I say, just to rewind that, I did say it at the start, but I think we're all realistic on this. You know, we're not going to start a campaign tomorrow to kick VAR out of football because it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So we're all about what impact can we have, what can we improve, and we'll prioritise that and narrow that focus to like trying to particularly get the in-stadium experience improved a bit, you know, whether that's better sound systems, better announcements for people in the game, a speeding up of the process would obviously be ideal. Like, what can we do to improve things for the match-going fans is what it ultimately comes down to.
Yeah.
The survey is really useful in giving us data to take to the authorities to actually discuss that, so they can't just dismiss it as, that's like your view, you know. I know this is the view of like 8,000 respondents to our survey, which is more than, I'm not sure of the numbers, if theirs was a number game, but occasionally people say, 8,000 fans, there's like millions of people go to football every week, which is true, but also so there's a slight misunderstanding on how surveys work. But also the survey was, if you combine the Premier League surveys that they've done with an Ipsos survey, did one a couple of years ago, which was very good, and there was another organisation did one. I think you combine all those surveys and it still didn't have as many respondents as the FSA's survey. So thank you to everyone who filled it in.
Yeah.
It will make a difference.
Which kind of, I guess, underlines the point that this is a big issue. You know, even 8,000 is quite a lot of people. Just quickly before we do go, one thing I want to touch on, because we've kind of danced around it here, and I mentioned it. You know, I'm going away on holiday this week, and unfortunately, Sky TV at short notice have moved the Spurs game to a Sunday. Which means now I'm going to miss the game. And originally I thought I was going to see the game, which obviously really irritates me on a personal level. You've got people flying in from all over the world to take part in International Fans Weekend who have came over on the premise they'd be going to a game on a Saturday, may have well had to rearrange their plans, stay an extra night. I don't know. You know, everyone on an individual basis. There may even be people who plan to come across for the game who can't now because they've moved the kick-off time. Are we powerless, Michael, to really affect things like this? Because it's gone on as long as I can remember, you know, and it's actually got worse, if anything. You know, Sky have they share the broadcast rights now with BT. I think Amazon pick up games. You know, it's probably going to change again in the future. We'll have more TV companies and streaming services picking up games, which just further enhances the problem. And it does just feel like we're kind of powerless to it. I mean, we've referenced that Bournemouth game when we were talking about VAR, but Sunderland playing away at Bournemouth at 12:30 is just ridiculous. And yet, you can only stand back and say there's no thought gone into what, no thought has been placed on the people who are actually going to be at this game. The Sunderland fans, the 2,000 of them or whatever, who travelled from all over the place, mostly from the northeast, to be at Bournemouth. There was no mind paid to them. And it almost feels like it's become accepted. It's like, well, we grumble about it and we get on with it because we're still going to sell out the away end. Like, do you feel like there's any way we can actually enact change when it comes to stuff like that?
K-pop Demon Hunters Haja Boy's breakfast meal and Huntrix meal have just dropped at McDonald's. They're calling this a battle for the fans. What do you say to that, Rumi?
It's not a battle. So glad the Saja boys could take breakfast and give our meal the rest of the day.
It is an honor to share.
No, it's our honor.
It is our larger honor.
No, really. Stop.
You can really feel the respect in this battle. Pick a meal to pick a side.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating McDonald's while supplies last.
You don't wash your jersey during a win streak. You don't switch seats when your team's up big. And you definitely don't shave during the playoffs. When things are working, you don't change them. That's why when you drink Jägermeister, you drink it ice cold. Anything else? Well, that'd just be bad luck. Drink it cold or don't drink it at all. Jägermeister. Damn, that's cold. Drink responsibly. Jägermeister liqueur, 35% alcohol by volume. Imported by Mast Jägermeister, U.S. White Plains, New York.
Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip-hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Best thing ever.
It is arguably the most difficult issue to crack the nut of like the TV fixtures thing, because we sit in front of the Premier League and we meet with the Premier League and our supporters groups individually at their clubs, because let's not let the clubs off the hook on this either. The clubs all agree to this and as members vote for this, although the clubs are very happy for the Premier League or Sky Sports or whoever to take the blame for it, but the clubs are complicit as well. So we sit there in front of the Premier League and the clubs and we'll make all these strong moral arguments that you've just made very eloquently and sort of nod along. And you can almost see them thinking as well, but then again, that TV deal is worth £8 billion and it's an awful lot of money. So it is really hard to crack the nut. I think they can do more to mitigate it for sure. I think for a start, I mean, an easy thing that springs to mind is they said that every season a club won't get more than 5 Monday or Friday evening games. And they've broken that sort of rule of thumb this year for Leeds and Man United. Things like when they move a game twice, they'll move a game for TV and then it'll get moved again for because a European fixtures come along. And there was such a lack of care in the first place that they chose a game that was almost certain to get moved again. If a game is moved twice, I think supporters should get a ticket to reimburse and have free tickets to go to that game, particularly away supporters. Why is any game getting moved twice? I think that they can do more with the money they get from TV to help supporters with transport costs and so on. I think that's a possibility. But I don't think they're going to walk away from the TV deal anytime soon, that's for sure. It does drive me mad that it's on multiple broadcasters, I must admit. It's the equivalent of oh yeah, I love The Sopranos. I'm going to watch The Sopranos. The first episode's on HBO, and then the next one's on Netflix. And then the one after that's on Disney Plus or something. It just doesn't happen in any other environment other than sport. And it's I want to watch the football over the season, but I've got to subscribe obviously to multiple different broadcasters. So that's really frustrating. I think on the flip side, what I've made, and they are minor wins. I'm not claiming these as enormous wins, but we do have the 6-week window that the Premier League clubs are sort of meant to stick to. They break it occasionally to give fans 6 weeks notice. We think that should be 12 weeks to align with train timetables. But they give 6 weeks, which is more than a lot of countries get. And that sort of did come about after pressure from fans and supporters groups. In the EFL, they have an interesting schedule, which we know about from last season, where they announce everything up until January in the FA Cup third round. So you do get a lot of notice in the EFL, which is very good at the start of the season. The quid pro quo with that is, though, as the season goes on towards the end of the season, there's only a 3-week notice period for games. So it is a lot because the broadcasters, as it comes to the close of the season, like to have the flexibility to choose the interesting games, don't they? The relegations or the promotion clashes. So yeah, it is a really difficult nut to crack. I think we would like to see football clubs do more for the supporters who do, particularly travelling supporters, who are the ones who are generally speaking most put out by this. I know there'll be people maybe listening to this who travel to watch home games at Sunderland from across the country, and they're travelling a long way as well.
Johnny included, yeah.
But like, I think they can do more, particularly for away fans, and increase the notice period to 12 weeks, at least at the very start of the season. I mean, why they leave some of them so late, I don't know. They quite often all blame each other. The broadcasters in the Premier League will say, well, we wanted to announce this fixture, but it was being held up by the police. But if you speak to the police, they'll say, oh, well, actually, it's the broadcasters who owned it up. If you speak to the broadcasters, they'll say, oh, it was the Premier League. So there's a bit of buck passing, which makes it hard to get to the bottom of. We are looking to make some progress, more progress in this area as well. It is something, again, we're raising with the Premier League. It's not an issue that's going away. And like I say, only last week, the Premier League broke its own guidelines by scheduling too many Leeds and Man United games on Monday and Fridays. Not Leeds, Man United and Everton, sorry. Everton had like 7 Monday night games this season, including one that was in the Stadium of Light, we're now only meant to have 5. So, I mean, personally, it's a Sunday. I've found since we've gone up the Premier League. I mean, we had a few of them in the EFL as well, but Sunday afternoon games for me, the atmosphere just drops off, whatever.
Especially if it's
Chris talks about this quite a lot, doesn't he? On the pod, it's noticeable. The atmosphere is just totally different for these Sunday games,
I feel it even just in myself. I'm like, I can't really bother today.
Where if it's a Saturday, I'm like, I'm on the drink today, I'm out. And then you get right up for the games and it's just not the same feeling. Michael, we could be here all day. We haven't even touched on half the things I want to talk about. You don't know this yet, by the way, but you're now our official FSA correspondent on the pod. So whenever anything kicks off, whether it be a survey or some sort of fan issue, you are now our point of contact. So we will be sure to get you back on very soon, mate. But thank you very much for coming on. I've really enjoyed it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm more than happy to be the How Are You podcast correspondent for the FSA. That sounds great. And if anyone's listening and wants to hear more about the FSA, just visit our website. We are entirely free to join. We're a free organisation to join, and strength comes in numbers. So get on board.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be sure to link that up as well so people can find your website. But cheers very much, mate. And thank you, Johnny. Been great.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers, Michael. That was really, really interesting stuff. That was great work the FSA do. So top marks.
Yeah, and thanks to our listeners. Like I say, we've got Spurs this weekend, so plenty of pods coming thick and fast. There will be reaction and previews and all that other good stuff. So hopefully we are talking about another win for Sunderland at the Stadium of Light, where the experience is delightful. Unfortunately, it is on a Sunday, but anybody making the trip across for the game, hopefully the international fans weekend goes really, really well. And we've spent a lot of time talking about things here today where there've been quite contentious issues, but we can at least say safely that Sunderland and the BLC who arranged that weekend do a fantastic job with international fans weekend. So hopefully people listening, if you're making the trip across, you will be at the fan party on Friday night. Me and Johnny will be there. So if you want to chat, you want to get yourself on the podcast, just find us. We'll probably be propped up in the corner somewhere with a pint. So we will have a little chat with you if you're going to be there on the night. Thank you very much, everyone. We will see you tomorrow.